based on that. So it's not just one server. So Facebook cannot handle this problem itself unless they start auditing all of the websites and basically filter out that they say that either you're following these policies or we are not giving you access to our system.
Well, suppose that I'm a website developer and I don't know much, right? And I say, hey, I don't know if I did my SSO integration correctly, and I want to kind of integrate it into my unit test framework, right? Could you do something specific to the web app? Forget about Facebook or any specific SSO, but from my perspective, I'm the little guy. Is there anything you could give them specifically?
Yes, exactly. So they can use the tool to see that taking different authentication paths, for instance, end up in the same account to not create backdoors for the accounts, or basically create a test account with Facebook and see that if they are actually respecting that access revocation within their framework. So basically, because they're looking at their own application as a black box, they interact with that application and see the effect of the state-changing effect on that application that they developed.
Okay, so are they relying on Facebook's revocation? To make sure that if they revoke an SSO, does Facebook have to actually hit that button too, or is it just on their side?
So there are various APIs that they can either continuously check for the token validity and based on that take action, or either have, so in our previous paper, we basically proposed that as soon as the access token is revoked, Facebook can send a request to the website as like an API that the website and sees that this user's access token was revoked and then take further action based on that. So there are various ways of doing it, but the simplest way is continuous access token validation. Yes.
Got it. Awesome. Well, again, let's thank our speaker. Great work. Ask some more later. Whoever's next. Next up, come on, get up. Okay, excellent. Wow. This stuff is complicated. I only got to ask you one of my questions, so after the session here. All right, so we're going to go from single sign-on to, let's see here.
Oh, is that your laptop? Oh, I'm so sorry.
HardLog. Okay, so we're going to slowly move more towards drones here. So if you're waiting for the drones, it's coming. So excited that we're going to have Adil here talking about HardLog, which is a way to make sure that your auditing system logs are protected while they're in memory or other types of things. So really excited in work because we've had all this great auditing work, and this is taking the next step to saying, hey, well, what about protecting that from live threats while the system is tracing? So, all right, without further ado, Adil.
Thank you very much, Nathan, for the kind introduction. Hi, everyone. Today, I'll talk about how to arm enterprises with an effective tool against cyber attacks in the form of HardLog. This is a joint work with my colleagues at Microsoft Research, Sangho Lee, and Marcus Peinado. It seems like in today's world, the threat of a cyber attack against an enterprise is always on the horizon. And we observe that tens of thousands of enterprises are actually attacked each year around the globe. In just the last year and a half, we've had high-profile cyber attacks against large enterprises, including Microsoft and Facebook. And it is estimated that these cyber attacks cost enterprises millions of dollars in revenue. One of the most effective tools that enterprises have against cyber attacks is the idea of system auditing. The idea is to have the operating system monitor security-related events on the machine. These events could be packets received by unknown IP addresses or sensitive files accessed by processes. These logs created as a result of these events are then used by system administrators for important investigation and remediation tasks, including periodically checking the systems for the health of that particular machine and forensically analyzing machines after compromises to discover the root cause of that compromise. In fact, system auditing is such an effective tool that a recent US executive order from the president has now mandated system auditing on all federal machines. Unfortunately, all existing audit systems suffer from a critical limitation. The limitation is that for performance reasons, the logs themselves must be kept on the machine that is actively being attacked. And in many attacks, what we observe is that an adversary is not just able to infect normal processes on a machine, but is also able to infect the operating system using their own malicious code, allowing this adversary to simply tamper with these logs. And these tampered logs are then not useful for any of the important tasks that logs are used for. This is not a small problem. In fact, according to some studies, more than 70% of attack investigations have found logs to be tampered. And that is because many malware automatically tamper logs. In principle, it's not impossible to protect logs. What you could do is whenever an event happens, you stop the process executing the event, create its log, and send that log right away to the system administrator over the network. This is what we call synchronous log protection. And as you might imagine, this incurs prohibitive performance slowdown because machines tend to produce tens of thousands of events every second, and network latencies are too high for this approach to be feasible. Precisely given these performance limitations of synchronous protection, all existing audit systems protect logs asynchronously, where the idea is that on security-related events, the processes are not stopped by the audit system. Rather, log entries from many different events are buffered in the machine for long periods of times and then sent to system administrators. For performance reasons, this buffering can occur from tens of seconds to even hours or days. And unfortunately, this provides a large window of attack for an adversary to simply destroy the important log entries that describe that particular attack that they made. So it seems that we've stumbled upon a classical problem in computer systems, which is the tussle between performance and security. And we find that existing protection schemes for system logs provide us an undesirable trade-off between the two. So the million-dollar question we ask ourselves is, can an audit system actually provide both performance and security? In the next few slides, I will explain how HardLog achieves this rather indelicate balance. The idea of HardLog is to leverage an external device connected to the machine through some device interface like PCIe or USB for log protection. Logs that are produced on the machine in response to events are sent through the device interface into the external device. Once stored, the operating system is not allowed to modify any of the logs themselves, but only a system administrator is allowed to securely retrieve those logs and even discard them when not needed. Now, this idea that I've just presented has several challenges to actually be achieved. The first particular challenge is that traditional storage devices are actually incompatible with the requirements of HardLog because they provide full control to the operating system in terms of both read and write access, and they have no way to remotely authenticate themselves to a trusted third party. The second problem is that although device interfaces are significantly faster than network storage interfaces, they are still unfortunately not fast enough for us to synchronously protect every single log entry. In fact, in one case study, what we observe is that for a particular set of events produced on a machine per second, full synchronous device protection can incur up to 6 times performance overhead, making this an infeasible approach too. To solve the first challenge, HardLog introduces the idea of an audit device, which is a specially crafted storage device that has a special storage controller. What this storage controller does is that it only accepts one kind of command from the operating system, which is to append logs in the storage itself. All other commands from the operating system are simply discarded, ensuring that the operating system cannot tamper with stored logs. The audit device, however, provides much more flexibility in terms of access to a system administrator. They are allowed to both retrieve logs from the device and even discard logs that are not needed anymore to reuse the storage of the device. However, all of the commands sent from a system administrator should be received by the audit device through a secure and end-to-end encrypted channel, authenticated and end-to-end encrypted channel, with keys that are known only to the system administrator and stored securely in the audit device. There are many more interesting properties of the audit device and many other implementation details, and I would refer you to the paper for all of those details. Even with this audit device that we've just built, we can't ensure efficient protection if we synchronously protect every single log entry. So we must smartly decide when to protect logs. Consider a typical attack, a typical remote attack on a machine. What would happen in practice is that an attacker would somehow have to download a payload from a server, executing certain system calls for network and file system events. Then the attacker would have to overcome certain defenses like break kernel ASLR or allow execution of code. And then finally, an attacker would have to execute code at high privilege, giving them pseudo access to actually tamper with the logs stored on the machine. So what we can see from this attack is that until the point when an attacker was executing, is able to execute their code at high privilege, logs are actually safe on that particular machine. And it turns out that several studies have shown that real-world exploits and proof of concepts typically use designated code execution system calls like execCVE or fork to actually execute their malicious code at high privilege. We call these system calls as critical events on a machine. And it is not surprising that the nature of these calls is such that they don't occur very frequently under typical workloads for many, many real-world programs. In fact, when we profiled several real-world programs, we found that they were so infrequent that they were less than 0.1% of all logged events in these programs. Leveraging these insights, HardLog then protects logs at critical events. The idea is to buffer logs that are produced at non-critical events in the machine. Whenever a critical event happens, you stop the process before the event is allowed to execute, and you protect all of the logs still stored in the machine by sending it to the audit device. What this ensures is that all attacks that end at a critical event, which as we've seen is true for many typical attacks, have their full attack trace protected before the critical event happens. However, protecting only at critical events definitely has a problem, which is that in rare scenarios, it is possible that an attacker might somehow be able to figure out how to use a non-critical event to execute code at high privilege. Imagine a catastrophic vulnerability in the operating system that allows a read system call, an attacker to execute a read system call and also execute code at high privilege. While this is rare, it can't be simply discounted. Unfortunately, it's unfeasible for us to protect logs at every single entry, as I've already mentioned. However, we can leverage this insight that attacks are not just one sequence of, not built on one event. Rather, they're composed of large sequences of events where the entire process typically takes hundreds of milliseconds for an attacker to start the attack and be able to compromise the logs on that machine. We can leverage this insight to make sure that an audit system that actually protects those logs with a tiny and bounded delay, so if an audit system can now protect logs with a tiny and bounded delay, it can ensure that an overwhelming portion of the attack trace is protected, even in the worst case where an attacker is able to use a non-critical event to compromise and execute code at high privilege. HardLog ensures this bounded delay for all non-critical events. When a non-critical event happens, the process is not stopped because that would be extremely slow. Rather, what HardLog does is that it isolates and prioritizes the aspect of log protection on the machine over all remaining background machine processes. This allows the system to protect logs in the audit device in the background as fast as possible. To implement this isolation and prioritization, HardLog undertakes several measures, including prioritizing the scheduling of the audit system, isolating the microarchitectural components of the audit system and other background processes, and even dedicating the interface between the audit device and the host machine to avoid background interference. As a result, logs are protected in the audit device without stopping processes as fast as possible, and that the delay for log protection is now bounded to the device interface speed instead of what an attacker does. To find out what exactly this delay is and to evaluate other properties of HardLog, we built a prototype for enterprise machines. On the audit system side, we used Linux's kernel Audit. The device interface we used was a USB 3.0 Generation 1 interface, and the audit device itself was built using a commodity off-the-shelf ARM development board, RockPro 64. I would like to point out that this is just one possible implementation of HardLog. In practice, there is nothing in HardLog's design that bounds it either to Linux, the USB protocol, or the development board we used. With the prototype that we built, the first thing we wanted to check was what exactly is the log protection delay incurred at non-critical events. As I mentioned, the audit system is isolated from all remaining background processes. So the only recourse for an attacker to delay log protection is to produce system calls at the highest machine rate and overwhelm the audit system and stop it from protecting system logs. And this is precisely the scenario that we tested in our paper, and we found a CDF of completion ratio versus protection time as follows. What this graph really shows is that all non-critical logs were protected before 15 milliseconds from the creation of these events, these entries on the machine itself. To put this in perspective, for typical attacks which take hundreds of milliseconds, most of the attack trace is now protected, even in the worst case where non-critical events are used. So what this essentially shows is that HardLog is able to provide fine-grained protection at non-critical events, in addition to providing full log protection at critical events. And it is important to remember that existing audit systems provide neither of these guarantees. HardLog provides these security guarantees while performing exceptionally well in the real world. We ran several real-world programs under standard benchmarks with Linux's default audit system, Audit. And we found that HardLog performed comparable to or better than Audit in most of these programs. The one program where HardLog was actually slower than Audit was a program that produced a significant number of critical events, but that was also because of the way the benchmark was designed. Nevertheless, HardLog was faster in all other programs and on the whole, and we provide a full explanation of all of these reasons in our paper if you're interested. So what this shows, what we believe this shows is that HardLog incurs low overhead under typical program workloads, and it is suitable for enterprise deployment because it is actually comparable to or faster than widely deployed audit systems. So to conclude, existing audit systems provide us an undesirable trade-off between performance and security in terms of log protection. HardLog maintains a delicate balance between performance and security. It provides full or fine-grained log protection for all log events while performing comparable to or faster than existing audit systems. So we believe that HardLog can significantly improve the state of log protection in today's enterprises. Thank you so much for your talk, and I will now be taking questions. Thanks. Hi.
All right. Okay, I'm going to beat these guys to questions. Thank you. So, no, this is the session chair privilege. No, go ahead. I'll let you talk first.
You sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
Cool. Hi, this was a great talk. I had a
Thank
quick
you.
question about the interface in which system admins can extract the logs.
Right, yeah.
My question was, why can't an attacker do it? Is it that your threat model assumes software-only compromise, but not hardware compromise?
So yes, the threat model assumes software-only compromise, but the reason why the attacker won't be able to do it is the keys themselves should never be leaked. As long as the key management system is correctly implemented, the keys should never be leaked by the system administrator or from the audit device. We provision those keys when the audit device is first set up. So as long as we could ensure these keys are never leaked, we can always ensure a secure channel only between the admin and the device.
And I'm not too familiar with this, but do you think, like I've seen these software compromises that also induce hardware faults, such as like rowhammer. Do you think that is in scope in this situation?
That's a great question. So essentially, because our audit device is actually isolated from the main system itself, so rowhammer and these sort of problems are not really that of a problem for the audit device. They're obviously a problem for the audit system in case the attacker somehow figures out how to turn off the audit system or something. But those are sort of not really the key attacks that we're targeting in this paper. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, of course.
Thanks for the talk. I have two questions. So first one is that hardware aims to use an external audio device to protect the audio logs, right?
Yes.
And elsewhere in the literature, some work tries to use TE, for example, SGX,
Right.
to guarantee the integrity of also this system audio logs. So have you compared your HardLog with this line of research?
Absolutely, yes. So there's a lot of work that uses actually SGX and TPMs even to protect. What these systems are essentially doing is trying to detect log tampering, because many of these TEs don't have like access to storage or to actually protect the logs.
Yes.
So they only detect tampering. But the important system logs that describe the attack can actually easily be destroyed because they're still kept by the operating system. So this is one of the problems that HardLog solves, which is ensuring log availability, which none of the existing systems do.
So if I understand this correctly, so
Yes.
HardLog is basically used to secure the logging.
Yes, to
logging
secure the logs.
It's basically used for secure storage, right? For
Yes.
the system audio logs.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And I have another quick question. So how difficult it is for this HardLog to be generalized to different kernel versions? So for example, I'm not sure how you implement this system. So if you want to, for example, upgrade this functionality
Right.
to different kernel versions, do you need to spend great efforts to modify the kernels or not?
That's a great question. So we will be open sourcing the code very soon, so you can also look at how we just modified the kernel. But one of the important things is that we made very, very few changes to the system kernel on the host machine. And as it turns out, the audits file, the C files for audit haven't been changed in, 10 years or so in the Linux kernel. So I don't think it would be that complex, assuming that the audit system is not entirely revamped. If they're still using things like event queues and what they're using right now, I don't think it would actually be, you might not even need to do anything, is what I think. Yeah.
So can I assume that
So we're going to go ahead and bump off for take it offline. Cool?
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you very much for the questions.
Okay, so we got like 20 seconds, and one question I have: what the heck is this isolation at runtime? Like you say this and then magically thing. Well, what does that actually mean? Because your threat model was really unclear during the talk,
Right.
and it'd be really interesting to understand what runtime threat you actually defend against.
So the isolation itself is essentially ensuring that the idea is that before the operating system is compromised, the operating system is trusted. So the operating system, a trusted operating system prior to compromise will try to protect logs as fast as possible.
Yes.
And when it does that, it will then isolate all of the factors that could slow down log protection. And that's where this isolation comes in, which involves including like,
Okay, so you're
scheduling
talking
time.
about
Yes.
temporal property of making sure that you get there as fast as possible,
Yes.
not memory safety.
Oh,
so,
no.
So memory corruption bug in the kernel that happens through a non-critical event could overwrite your log.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that.
Okay, cool. I'm excited. I have like hundreds of questions for this. Great work. All right, so let's say thank you to our speaker once more.
Thank you very much.